provide the right opportunities to qualified and semi-qualified finance professionals with experience up to 10 years. Monster Enterprise provides you access to thousands of jobs through this event. This event will be hosted online on 8th and 9th October, where you can interact with the recruiters directly and attend sessions by the top finance experts in the industry. If you want to participate in this event, you can simply register yourself to the link given in the description box of this YouTube video. With the purpose to equip the finance professionals with the right skills to grow in their career, we bring the best-in-class finance experts and talk to them about their journey and experiences. For today's session on in-demand skills for a bright future in finance, we have Ashish Kohli and Shailesh Jha with us. Ashish Kohli is a chartered accountant with more than 12 years of experience at Standard Chartered Bank, where he is currently serving as a director, Payable Finance, Group Trades Finance. Ashish started his journey at Standard Chartered Bank as an intern and was exposed to multiple functions including sales, strategy, business planning, and more. Next, we have Shailesh Jha, who currently serves as the Vice President at Private Market Crystal, which is a vet and advisory. It's into fintech, with a master's degree in finance from BITS Pilani, dual MBA from the University of Chicago, Booth School of Finance, Business, and China Europe International Business School. Shailesh started his journey with an internship at National Stock Exchange of India Limited and proceeded further to work at Sun Group, Credit Suisse, Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, American Textile Company, and more organizations like that. With the speakers having vast experience in finance, we look forward to have an enriched conversation with you regarding the skills and the finance professionals must have for a growth in their career. And to have this conversation, we also have Namita Agarwal, a CA and a BCom pass out from Nasi Munji College of Commerce and Economics. She's currently serving as the vertical head of BFSI at Monster Jobs. Welcome Ashish, Shailesh, and Namita. Over to you.
Thank you, Vanisha, for the nice introduction. Welcome, Ashish and Shailesh. So,
thanks for having us, Namita.
Pleasure is all ours.
Thank you, Vanisha and Namita, for that introduction.
So, I'll start with Ashish. If you could throw some light on how did you select finance as a career, when you were in a 10th standard and you thought of pursuing commerce and then you thought of pursuing your CA. So, what was the mindset that time? Because now that you have spent more than a decade in that industry, you would be able to understand that what was your mindset then, and that mindset then took you to this career path, and you are happily settled in this. So your thoughts on the whole journey, or what was your mindset then while selecting this?
Thanks, Navita, and thanks again for having me on this. I think it's an interesting way to share some of the some of the things that we've learned right over the last few years with some young finance professionals. So the journey was very simple actually, because our brains are not very complicated at that point in time, right? We are confused, but it's not complicated. So and your parents have a lot of influence over what you sort of select, or how you sort of take this forward. So from a 10th standard or 12th standard perspective, I think it was quite simple that I was not a coder, or I did not have a lot of insight or a liking or love for a lot of coding or engineering related stuff. And my father had a lot of influence on me. So he was a businessman, and he always thought that running commerce and understanding finances is very, very important as you sort of move along. So I think that had a very big influence. And then I joined my college, where becoming a chartered accountant was a natural progression. So I think from there, I think the entire thought process started. And also I think post that, I think from one role to another, and from one opportunity to another, you just sort of move on, and you go ahead with it. So as and when the world opens up opportunities to you, you sort of go ahead and get that. So I think that's how the entire progression happened, and that is what I was thinking at that point in time.
Good to know that, Ashish. So same question, Shailesh, if you could also let me know how did you choose your journey. You have done MBA finance and uh, other education qualifications. So what was your mindset back then? And
So for me, I think it was not that straightforward. So I come from Jharkhand, which is the and Bokaro Steel City, which is largely known in the region for like being a hub of coaching centers. It's like kind of Eastern Kota. So when I was in my class 12, and if you were good at mathematics and you were male, it was generally expected that one day you'll be an engineer. uh, Generally and I did exceedingly well at my class 12 examinations. I was a CBSE board topper in that year, so I had like 98.2% marks, and people were like expecting like you'll get a direct admit to one of the better places, you'll go there. My entire career choice of finance was largely about disappointing those expectations. So I took my first year I went to BITS Pilani. I had a single degree that was BE Electrical and Electronics Engineering, and I realized that I did not want to do this. Uh, like I was not enjoying the courses. I was not doing pretty well at college. And the good thing with Pilani is that it allows you to choose your courses and whatever you want to do at any point in time. So there was this option of taking a dual degree. So I in the in the 30 or 35 years when since they had started offering a dual degree, I was the only person to have a master's in finance and a bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering. It was a kind of a bold decision I took, and it was kind of compromise as well, like because I told my parents that I want to do this, and they said, okay, but you can't drop your first degree. So I had a dual degree, and a couple of weeks back, I actually visited Pilani, and some teachers were saying that it was like a nightmare actually designing your courses because nobody has had that same combination that you had taken. They were actually very generous enough. I ended up doing 9 or 10 courses a semester. But then again, like it was a gradual realization. So first thing I thought that no, I'll probably take up economics. Then it moved from economics to financial economics, and then it ended up being in finance. I also remember in 2010 when we were being given something Pilani does. It's called the practice school, which is basically you spend 5.5 to 6 months interning at a place. And in general, at that point in time, engineering jobs or engineering internships were much better and more available than those in finance, particularly in a place like Pilani. So so I also applied, but the thing is that I could have actually gotten something like a Honeywell or an AMD or Nvidia at my level of GPA, but I chose National Stock Exchange, which barely paid a kind of stipend of about 7,500 a month. So those were hard days. It shows kind of your commitment to the thing. But I definitely say I enjoyed myself. And when I came back, when I was back in the industry at around 2014 and 15, I saw most of my engineering friends who had done the MBA and were doing the same thing that I was doing. Like, but I had just made the decision 7, 8 years earlier.
got
So
it.
it was coming full circle. Most of my wing, which was true blue engineering graduates in 2009 and 10, are today working at JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley. So there's no difference in that sense. So coming from engineering to finance, the only thing I want to tell like parents and students who are watching, like uh, the if you are good at maths, it just doesn't mean that you have to be an engineer. You could actually even be a mathematician or statistician, because my first job at work was not even finance, it was econometrics. So it was basically economics and statistics. Getting to an MBA then was a very straightforward decision. Like, everybody was doing it. I had had some business experience. I was not going there to learn finance, but it was more like, learning network and building networks. I think that's one thing that people have to understand. Like, if you're studying in an MBA, you are basically wasting your time, because, a manager is somebody who needs to have people skills. Like, if you have basic literacy and numeracy skills, I think that's more than enough. And that's something that people also need to realize, that there is a difference between a master's in finance and an MBA. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think this kind of will help the young professionals who are like thoroughly confused at the start of their career and what to choose. So they need to take sometimes some bold decisions. It may or may not be the right thing, and they will not even realize it until they actually are 5 years down the line to whether that decision was right. It takes a while for a lot of things to show results, And whatever, I also personally feel that, I have transitioned from a law firm, from taxation to recruitment, sales, a lot of things. But I feel that there is nowhere I can say that whatever I've learned, I have not been using it. So, whatever you learn also in every job, it is used. So it is nothing that it gets wasted. So yeah, that kind of gets reiterated here. So the next question is that because we are having this event FinRise, and lot of candidates will be coming for finance related roles. Finance is something we are saying broad. It also would include, say, audit, taxation, legal, right? So both of y'all are from like you have Ashish has been predominantly in banking industry. Shailesh, you have been in bank, you have been in venture capital fund. So if you could tell me from your industry standpoint, for different roles, not necessarily the role you are in, what are the different skill sets which a candidate should focus on at the entry level, at a mid level? You must be interviewing hundreds and thousands of candidates in so many years. You must have given interviews. So if something you could tell me on the skills specific to your industry or in general, starting with Ashish.
Thanks, Namita. Thanks for that question. And I think when we were in when we entered the industry and we just completed our qualification, I think at that point in time, things were slightly different. Things were evolving, and they with respect to the kind of skills that you need. But what I essentially, when I was graduating and getting into banking at that point in time, principally it was my core finance skills which were looked at, right? And the fact that I had a chartered accountancy degree, and based on that I got my next opportunity. While I was in the job, the skills that I learned in terms of, or the skills that I'd already learned, which came in very handy for me, was in terms of what I did with analytics, or what I did with analyzing balance sheets, because I moved as a finance professional, I moved into business very, very quickly, rather than going through the entire journey of first doing finance and then moving into business and getting business for the organization that you're working in. So I think at that point in time, my core skills really helped me. At one point, once your core skills sort of stop, and you have to start then learning a lot of peripheral skills, right? Which is in terms of, it could be in terms of soft skills, which is very, very important, because it's important for you to sort of create your own brand. If you're going for an interview, say in the next 10 days, 15 days, 20 days, you may not be in a position to communicate your brand to the person who's interviewing you. So at that point in time, it's important that you at least be very honest, be very clear in terms of what is your aspiration and what is it that you stand for, right? And that, by that, in some way could sort of communicate your brand. The other thing is, once you sort of progress in your career, it's extremely important that people should know you for what you bring to the table, what kind of skill sets you bring to the table. And the industry eventually is a very small place, right? So if you are specializing in something, everyone would know you in the industry if you are at the right levels, doing the right deals, etc. So at that point in time, all that you've built over a period of year in terms of your branding and the skill sets comes in very handy. So your soft skills will help you network with the right kind of people, and then will give you the next opportunity that you would eventually be looking for. The other skill set, which is very, very critical along with your core skills, would be your tech skills, if I can use that word, because the entire digital landscape is evolving in such a way that it's important that you are well abreast with what kind of technology is evolving and how does it impact you to solve the problem that your organization may be facing. So if you are clear about what is happening in the market, and what is your problem, how you can use those arms and ammunitions to solve your problem, I think that is a very important skill set as you sort of move in future. And we can talk about in detail what kind of skills that you can acquire. But broadly, if you categorize, I would say your core skill sets, your social skill sets, and your tech skill sets. Now, I think these would be the top 3 skills that you would want to really concentrate on.
Yeah, very nicely put, Ashish. Your thoughts, Shailesh?
Yeah, so Namita, I think I have kind of sampled more aspects of finance in my journey, so it will be more of a cross-sectional opinion from me. I think finance broadly we can divide, into 3 sides. Like, one is the buy side, sell side, and the infrastructure. So buy side is largely investment management, people who manage money for some or manage portfolios for groups of investors. The other one is sell side, which is basically people who are trying to help companies or individuals sell and access financing. And the third one is infrastructure, which is risk, legal, tax, audit, and everything. And one thing more I forgot, which is consumer bank, which is the part of the banking that touches most of our lives. So finance actually goes into these things. And also there is a part that's corporate finance. I have done a bit of each of these things. And while general skill sets are similar, there are certain skill sets that are very specific to certain parts that need to be emphasized. The first thing, if you look at investment management, where I came from, the first thing that you look at in terms of investment research, in research, you have to be somebody who's a curious person, who is very, very interested in learning what is happening in the field. And you have to be like a subject matter expert in that sense. So there's daily learning is very important. And the ability to articulate that learning in a very crisp and concise format to people, and to be what I call is conversible, is very important. A conversible person is a person who can read a research paper and can make you understand those things in a matter that not just helps you understand those things, but also soothes your psychological anxiety. Because at the end of the day, all of finance is a people's business. Second part is what my job was with a CFO of a large bank, that was analytics. And that was consumer banking analytics. That is a place where you need to bring a product mindset, where you need to start thinking about things from, this is a product that we are designing for customers, how it is going to be helpful for them. So we were trying to come up with like a risk management product for making loans in real estate sector, or something like, an infrastructure loan filter, or all those things. So you have to start thinking about things from a very product description or product management mindset, like, trying to more think about things in project or batches rather than in terms of parts of a whole. Then the third job that I did was a hedge fund. Hedge fund is basically a very different world. So it was a Chinese hedge fund, and it was like cutting edge of technology, where you're supposed to be learning a lot of tech skills, and you're learning to make a market. But it's a great exercise in self-control. Like, most of the traders don't fail because they lack knowledge. Most of the traders fail because they lack self-control. Like, you put good money after bad, or like you just extend yourself in a particular direction. And the final one, which I was doing currently with Sun Group, is your corporate finance and family or private market investing. This one is more of PEVC style things. And this is where you need to be very widely read, in the sense that you need to have a very wide understanding of different industries, and you need to develop your own intuition. So all in all, a person in finance should be someone who is constantly curious and improving on their knowledge. So the first thing that you need to do is probably read upon what is happening in your sector every day. Like, it's not going to ever end. And the second thing, as Ashish was also saying, technologically upgrade yourself, because I think that is important, because the job that I was doing in my internship in 2010 does not exist. It's already been automated. So that cycle is like squeezed. There's like 10 years, 11 years, everything just gets automated. So you need to move to the next level. And the third thing is, obviously, we are all in a trust business. We are in this business because people trust us to do the right thing. Whether you're in investment banking, you need to be a person that people can trust, because most of the deal flows come through networks. They don't come through because people trust your knowledge. People need to be able to understand that this guy is not, putting me into a wrong deal or something. So relationship building and trust is very important. And also, like, they should be able to have a lot of reliance and faith on what you bring to the table as a subject matter expert or a knowledgeable person. So that's what I think. Like, if you had to 5 things that you need to do today, probably read a lot, meet a lot of people in your segment, try to come across as a person who's transparent and reliable, and then keep upgrading your skills.
I think both of you have given, a entire spectrum of skills which finance professionals or in general any professional should be doing, and upgrading. I think it's being said, how much ever cliche it may sound, but that's the fact of the matter, that you have to keep upgrading yourself. But I think more and more, I feel the younger generation is not doing it, and that is the feedback. Even though it may sound harsh, but that is the feedback I get from the industry, that the younger generation takes things very casually, because they see that MBA or a CA by itself is enough for them to be selected, and they do not upgrade themselves, or they do not prepare well, or even after on the job they have to continuously read, as both of you said. That does not happen, and that's where they fail to grow up the ladder in their career path. So yeah, this is something, yeah, all finance or any professional should bear in mind. The next question, Shailesh, I'll ask you about, something funny, some incident which happened while you were interviewing any candidate, or you were giving an interview, which you would like to share, uh, just from a fun element
Okay.
standpoint, for the audience, you know.
Yeah. So a lot of times what happens and during interviews is that you meet a wide variety of people in different contexts. Somebody who you might have met as an interviewer while the process is ongoing, you might just meet them as a client while you're doing a business. So this happened like a couple of years back. I was interviewing for a public markets fund, basically something that invests institutional or investors' money in public markets. And I had just met the man who was the portfolio manager of the fund. They were hiring an analyst for that position. That's where I was being considered. And I did an interview with him, and we had like a closure. And he said that let's speak within 7 days or 8 days. A couple of days later, when I'm in my Sun Group role and I'm speaking with my boss, suddenly what happens is that he said that, Shailesh, we are going to invest in this fund which is based in Singapore. These guys have a very nice tech investment platform, and you should really look at that. And I've brought the portfolio manager of that fund here to speak with you. And then I realized this is the same guy I had interviewed with 2 days back. It does become a bit funny that when he started to ask me like, would you like to introduce yourself, and to him, and I tell myself that yeah, I did that 2 days back. There are a few things to understand, like the fact that people would be looking for roles is a very very is something that somebody with a pragmatic approach would be uh, factoring in their hiring and recruitment decisions. So they shouldn't be surprised. Like if you are managing a team of 5 or 10, you would know that somebody's expectations will get unmet, and they would be looking for roles. So that's one, and that's one thing. And the second thing is, even in these times, it's important to exercise discretion. So while it's important to be like very very transparent and open in this industry, it's also to understand that people will be looking around. It's a very fluid industry which kind of rewards talent, and people keep moving around, particularly in both in investment banking and investment management. So it's important to never burn bridges with people just because they have left your company or your team.
Yeah.
They'll probably come back. It's a very small industry. It's like having that football 11. Sometimes some players would not fit into your team. They'll go and join another club. That doesn't mean that they are bad. It's just that conditions were bad, and then you dropped them because, like in cricket, you needed an extra spinner in your team, and you had to drop the third seamer. That doesn't mean he's a bad fast bowler. It's just that those were the conditions. And when you are playing in outside of your country, you probably need an extra fast bowler. You could probably bring him back. So that's the problem, and that's the thing. Like it's important to be in this industry with an open and pragmatic mindset that people will come, people will leave. You cannot meet all expectations, and it always happens so.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this, Shailesh. Ashish, you have any such funny incident to share?
Not any funny incident while I was being interviewed or interviewing anyone, thankfully. But I think while you are while you are being interviewed, and I wanted to touch on the point that Shailesh raised, right? Um, Everything is dependent on how you are, where you are, what is the expectation of the stakeholder that you're dealing with, and what is your expectation. I think if you can manage that, understand that, and then communicate accordingly, I think you'll be a winner more often than not. So I think for people who are going for an interview, and there are times where you may not have the right skill sets that are required for the job. There may be times where you may be overqualified for a job. But I think just to understand what is the other person expecting, where is the other person coming from, and then accordingly communicating and changing your strategy, if you are also interested in doing what you're doing, is absolutely the key. So I think that soft skill, or that understanding the situation, is very, very relevant when you're going for any interview.
Yeah, and I think there is something to add here as well. Ashish, you will also agree. A lot of times what happens is, at least in India, the culture that we have, we are not trained how to take rejection and defeat very well. We only talk about people who have succeeded in life. We don't talk about people who have failed a lot. Like, somebody who's dropped college, nobody talks about them. And that creates like a huge pressure. So what happens is that people carry that mindset even at roles. So sometimes there is, a guy who is good, but probably he is not the right fit for the role that you're recruiting. And then that guy gets rejected, and then he starts not applying to jobs, not trying hard enough. And this happens more with people who have come from maybe like a weaker socioeconomic background, or who are probably not very well represented in the community. So I'm talking about diversity and imposter syndrome here, particularly in finance sector. So what happens is, like, you could have people who are like first time college goers. You could have people who are like coming from a weaker economic or caste or religious background, or you could have women. So all these times what happens is, once you get rejected, you feel like an imposter, like maybe I'm not good enough. You have to understand that this is an industry where you have to probably apply a lot of times. You have to get through a lot of these things. And most of the times, the verdict, it's very difficult to understand, but it's most of the times the verdict is not against your talents, but sometimes it's just because, the role doesn't fit you. It doesn't mean that you should stop applying or you should stop interviewing. This is something that I notice in a lot of people who I personally help through my college networks and everything. Like, oh, I didn't get through this interview. What is even the point of actually going and doing the CFA degree? Or why should I even pursue CA because I'm not good enough? Nobody even like looks at my resume. So I think that is a very important part of understanding and doing things, that you have to somehow take this thing within your stride and understand that obstacle is a part of the path, rather than just think that this is like a hindrance and I should just move away. And this is, for me, this was something that I understood the hard way, because I was trying to recruit in a country where I did not even know the language 2 years ago. Like China, the office work is done in Mandarin. And then you land in a country which is involved in a fight with your country at Doklam in 2017. You are like trying to do an MBA and you don't know anybody there. And then you are like speaking a language which is not the official language. So you have to realize that, yeah, you were in RDI, you had 5 years in Credit Suisse, but you have to take that into you have to absorb that and realize that none of this is important to you. So when you are stripped away from all your entitlement, what remains is what will take you forward, and not having that kind of chip on your shoulder. And that chip on your shoulder becomes bigger as you move further in your career.
Interesting perspective, both of you. I think, yeah, this that candidates at whatever level, you will face rejections at some point in time. So you have to just understand the perspective of the employer. There is no reason why an employer would reject you unless he is also spending a lot of time and energy. So understand from the perspective of the employer, and improvise yourself wherever you went wrong, introspect. And and there are ample times which happens that the same candidate may get rejected at one. In fact, that's the way it works, that, the same candidate would be selected at one and rejected at one. So even from employer standpoint, I tell them that it is not that the candidate is good or bad. It's just that maybe in those 30 minutes he did not do well. That could be a possibility. It is like an exam. Interview is just like an exam. You may, like in CA, we take so many attempts. So, it doesn't really necessarily define a person in that 30 minutes. At the same time, candidate should also keep on improvising himself based on, the feedback he gets. Now, the next question I would want to know that, both of you have had exposure overseas, right? You all have not just been in India. Ashish has been in Singapore for a while. You have been in China. So if you all could tell me, is there some, lot of difference in terms of expectations from the candidate, or, how is it very different from working in India and overseas? Because it just, like, people just think that India is, there are a lot of negative things. If you are in abroad, it will be very easy life, and in India it is like you work long hours. So I don't think we can generalize that, but if you can give your perspective to it.
I can maybe go first. So great question actually. So I worked in India for almost 8 to 10 years, and then I worked in Singapore now for 4 years. And my job, because it's a global job, I literally talk to 30 plus markets on a regular basis, right? So it's from from markets in, say, China or Hong Kong to the South Asian or ASEAN markets, and then even going to the MENAP, or going to the US. So culturally, I think there is a lot of difference between how these markets operate, what the expectation of people are in that market, and the expectation of your bosses or hirers are in that particular market. So I think first thing that we need to understand is we have to accept the differences. And once you accept the differences, and then accordingly, conduct yourself, while you're doing this. So in terms of how you work is also very largely defined by, the cultural aspects as well. So, let me give you some examples, right? I mean, there are markets where if you fix up any meeting between, say, 12 to 1:30, it is frowned upon. And, people, and there is a reason for that, right? Because they may not have the help that we have, say, back in India, right? There's an ecosystem around us. People are taking care of everything, right? They have to run their errands while they are doing their jobs, right? So from 12 to, say, 1:30, they are going for a haircut sometimes. They are going to the gym sometimes. They are going to, so many activities, even funnily buying groceries at that time, right? So because they have only that much time, there is limited help. And, that is something that you have to respect. In some other markets, it's okay to work even after, say, 9 or 10 in the night. But I think things are evolving. People respect each other's time now. People respect each other's personal time. Weekends are something that, people would not generally want to bother, because, that's your time where you refresh and, you come back next week. So I think things are evolving. People are understanding that, personal time is equally important. And now with COVID, I think it has gone absolutely topsy-turvy, right? Because, for some industries and markets, you've been working all through the day. Yeah? You start at 8, you end at 10, because, you have to be available. And, it's just about opening your laptop and talking to people. And for some other professions, it's so like a gig economy where, you may be given a particular job, and your responsibility is to complete that job in a particular period of time. And then, things are evolving, the workplaces are evolving, cultures are evolving. So very interesting space. But I think I would not say there is plus or minus. It's just about a cultural thing in every market. But it's all improving, and it's going in the right direction is what I would say. So that's my bit. Shailesh, you want to add something?
Yeah. So Ashish, I'll just add this factor that, if you have to work and thrive in markets that are outside of your country, the first thing that you need to do is to add a bit more of novelty seeking element in your own character. Unless you seek out people and try to understand their perspective and try to, move out of your comfort zone of thinking, of your friend circles and all those things, then only you will be able to first reach out to them and understand how they perceive work. And then how do they, perceive success, what does success mean to them? What does probably, the right kind of appraisal and appreciation of work for them? And then how they actually do what they do. So for instance, one of those bigger dichotomies that we understand, we fail to understand sometimes, is that people in Europe are somewhat perceived to be lazy by Asians. Like they want to have good life. They are like people who will not put in the yards. They'll probably go out of their offices at 5 and they'll just chill out. That's a wrong assumption on a lot of levels, because in their world, most of the work is personality and relationships driven. In our world, most of the work is content driven. For them, when they are going out and having a beer with somebody, it is actually a part of their work, because most of the relationships and works that are happening is being built on that. You can actually blame them for not so people blame others for succeeding because they don't have the skills that others have. In fact, that's the same thing. Like when I speak to my friends who are British, like, British, not British Indian, they feel that, Indians work too hard and they push themselves too hard, and that's why they succeed. And that's why they are good for risk roles. They're good for tax audit and compliance roles, but we'll not have a guy who's an Indian who's heading investment bank. So these are, a lot of these cultural misconceptions that come across because we do not try to reach out and understand what does success mean to this person. And success means a lot less different to an Indian or Chinese person, because you are competing for resources in a market where resources are scarce. For Chinese, like working 14 hours is important because of the weird thing in China that you cannot marry until you afford a house. And housing itself is such a huge thing that basically it means that you are scrounging every time of your younger phase in life just to buy a house. So that is not the situation somebody who's British is facing. They are into that job because their motivations are different. They were provided a house, a healthcare, or something like, a minimum employment assurance. They are there because they love that job and they are trying to satisfy themselves on a higher Maslow's pyramid of needs. So you have to understand everybody's priors and assumptions and put yourself in others' shoes. And that starts to happen when you start to have friends who are from very different communities and, places, and you try to understand their culture, their history, their society. Until you do that, everybody will probably seem to you very strange, and you will find yourself to be a misfit. And I've heard so many complaints by people that, bahar mein to, when we go outside, we face discrimination. Discrimination is there, but a lot of discrimination is also masquerading as perceived grievances. You don't want to understand a foreign market, you will never succeed.
Yeah.
That's also happening in India. Like 2 weeks ago, we found that so many foreign automakers just exited India because they did not want to understand what Indian consumers want. So you will probably have to exit this market. The similar thing also happens when you are actually doing the same thing for abroad. Like you don't want to understand the China and Chinese. You want to come up with your own models of work and your models of what is right and wrong. Nobody's interested. Same thing in Singapore, or same thing in the UAE for that matter. You have to be culturally open. You have to start understanding how that person's family life, social structure has geared them to become what they are. Why did they get into this job in this first place? And what motivates them? Until you understand those things, you cannot really, succeed in a career abroad. And also, the other thing is that we sometimes come to foreign markets with some kind of like entitlement complex. I have had like friends who have applied to PR in Canada, and they say that after that, oh, they are giving me such a junior role. The point is that a lot of times you have to realize that for them, the local market experience is everything. Unless you have worked in global firms, it's something that they will not highly value. So it's like these things that you have to realize, that we have to be very humble and culturally perceptive if we need to be able to do and go and do business in markets that are outside of the country. And that humility comes when you start to start asking introspective questions about, why do I think what I think? Why does success mean this thing to me? Why does this thing is so much more important to me at job? Then you realize something else might just be much more important to somebody else at their job.
Just one thing I wanted to add, maybe a slightly different perspective is, and one of the learnings that I've had in my career would be, and advice maybe to people who are listening, is that be more strategic, right? When you and I've seen that a lot of people that I work with now, and I work with all sorts of different people from different markets. I think there are certain markets who are slightly ahead, or maybe they are more developed than India is, because people have been very strategic in doing what they're doing and thinking what they're thinking, right? Because they have a plan, they have a strategy, and then there is execution. So don't mix strategy and execution, because that will lead to a lot of confusion. And then we explain this with the word called jugaad, right? Because oh, we can get it done because we can do jugaad, but you are not supposed to do jugaad. What we were supposed to do in the first place was be strategic, make a plan, and then execute. So you don't need that much jugaad.
With a few nice, I think this is something the listeners will really enjoy hearing. One of the second last questions is about this fintech and AI, ML. Now I'm just clubbing all of these things which are little tech, like you touched upon tech, Ashish, that tech skills are important. But at the same time, I feel there's information overload. There's so much coming in, and there is already a lot of things you are reading which is core to your skill. Plus, there is this AI, ML, and from finance standpoint, it is not something embedded.
Yeah.
So do you think that the the younger people, or even the people who are at a mid 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, because you are already in the industries, do you think that these skills are really needed, or it is just role based? Because there's a lot of stress which gets created when they feel that, okay, I don't know about this, I'm not reading, I'm not getting the time to know what's happening on the other side. I mean, other than finance side, on the tech, AI, ML. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, it cannot be, overstated. I mean, the importance of all these changes that have come, right? It could be blockchain, or it could be all the AI models that have been used. It could be in forecasting, or it could be in, predicting what you're doing. I think you have to get all the understanding of that. I mean, at whatever level you are in as a finance professional, and all these elements are going to touch us in some or the other way, right? So you either could be the one who's developing models, right, in terms of, say, cost forecasting, revenue forecasting, or you could be on the other end in terms of dealing with banks who are now using credit models and performance risk models, which are based on data, right? And essentially you have to then ensure that when you are projecting your financials, and P&Ls and balance sheets are not only the things that banks now look at. They will look at elements which are around a company, in terms of how they are dealing with their suppliers, how they are dealing with their customers, and all those elements are looked at by a bank in deciding what is the credit that a company could get. So you could be at the receiving end, you could be at the end where you're developing all these with the help of all these new AI, ML models, or even blockchain. I mean, as a matter of fact, anywhere where you need any kind of trust to be established, right? So you need a blockchain is a solution that can come very handy, right? Because someone very nicely explained in a maybe, I don't know whether we have time for this, maybe I can just take a shot at it in 1 minute. What is blockchain as a solution, right? So imagine there are friends who are going for a picnic, and it's a 5-day picnic, and there are one person is spending on food, one person is spending on entertainment, one person is spending on say travel. And at the end of the day, what you do is you give some money to somebody, and you take somebody from somebody after the trip is over, right? And now we have started using Google Sheets for doing all these things. So say you put everything on Google Sheets. This Google Sheet and the acceptance that I have to pay you this, you have to receive this much from me, and the agreement between all these 4 or 5 parties is nothing but the simplest form of blockchain, right? Because there is acceptance from the parties in terms of what you have to receive or pay, and then there is a distributed ledger. So essentially what I'm trying to say is you are establishing trust between all these 5 parties through this Excel sheet, and which is what blockchain is doing. So anywhere where you need trust to be established in finance industry, you would need blockchain. So the usage of blockchain also will then eventually evolve basis that, and the use cases would come. So yeah, it cannot be overstated in terms of what is the importance. It's important that people read about it. People, if move ahead with it, and get to know more about it as they sort of move along in their careers.
Nice. I think this like simplest way you could explain the buzzword blockchain to the audience. Shailesh, your perspective?
I think the people need to understand that three of the most important functions of finance: trust, efficiency, and speed are going to be disrupted by technologies that would be coming. So when we think about trust, we are thinking about regulatory technologies. We're talking about blockchain-based solutions. When you're talking about efficiency, we are talking about AI-based solutions that help you identify risks better through non-linear risk models. We're talking about AI-based solutions that actually help you do KYC better, AI and ML-based solutions that help you do KYC better at banking. We are also talking about trading patterns, the ones that help you understand and identify trading patterns better. Then you also have to look at another buzzword that has become more and more important, especially for accounting professionals, is to not just look at shareholder value maximization, but stakeholder value maximization. That's where ESG comes. Then we should be also looking at things like your things which help you improve the speed of it. That's where this no code or low code platforms come. That's where core banking infrastructure comes in, where everything is integrated into one cloud within computing, IoT within banking. All these things are coming. The important thing is not to get overwhelmed with these things, but to understand what they are in essence and what your function is in essence. So if you are an investment management or an investment analyst, the most important thing to add to your arsenal would be some AI ML skills, because that will help you become more and more cognizant of non-linear patterns that affect your investment decisions or recommendations. If you are into something which I would be like in my current role, that is big picture venture capital investing or big picture investing. I think for that, understanding long-term investing, bringing in an ESG perspective and understanding how environmental, social, and fairness standards are met by your investments in companies, that is much more important. Similarly, if you are into things like ledger management, KYC, if you are into understanding how customer accounts are done, or into how contracts are automatically updated in consumer bank, that's where even in wholesale and merchant bank, that's where a lot of automated blockchain solutions come. So there are parts of technology that you need to understand, but you don't need to understand this entire elephant. Somebody needs to touch its tail, somebody needs to touch its trunk. You don't need to do all of it together. And so the thing is that whatever is relevant to your line of business, start acquiring skills in it, but don't try to eat the entire landscape of tech unless that is your thing, because a lot of people are genuinely interested in technology. That's the thing that I would probably emphasize on.
And just to add, I think that's a great thread, because just to add to that is understand the problem you're trying to solve and how technology can solve that problem, right? You don't need to learn about everything, or maybe you need to know how it's going to solve your problem, but then you have a use case in mind and then use what is available as arms and ammunitions in form of simple technology or complicated technology to solve it.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we think when we say product mindset, having the thing that you begin with a problem and then you find the technology, not you begin with a technology, learn everything about it, and they say that it can be applied to 50 different problems. So yeah, having those tools and trying to understand the problems with a perspective or the lens of those tools, lens of that problem, that's important from a finance perspective. Otherwise, you will be like pulled into a very, very tech itself is like a very detailed art. That's the reason why Google is building and putting solutions on the shelf. And then there are tech teams within banks which are just pulling them off the shelf and applying.
Interesting to know all of this. So I think I can go on and ask, there are a lot of questions coming to my mind, but I think in the interest of time, I'll have to wrap up with the last question, where you could just give some advice to the young professionals, not just young, because I think at all levels. So from a young professional perspective, it could be how to crack interview or how to choose a role, and at a mid level it could be somewhere, a lot of people struggle to change their roles, right, from say a audit to industry, or from X role to Y role, and after mid level they feel that they are stuck. They don't get opportunities. So these are the two areas, because we have already spoken about a lot of things on the skills and everything. So if you could just sum up that in terms of an advice to the job seekers, that would help.
Shailesh, you want to go first?
Okay. I think there are a few things. One thing is that we have to get this thing out of our minds, is that learning is front loaded. Our parents, or maybe like people who are 10, 15 years older than us, were brought up in a world where you gained all your education in college, and then you just had a work life, and then you applied that education to their work life, and then you retired. So I think the most important thing is that expect to be learning at all times, all points in time, even if you are 40, 45, 50, 55. That will never end, because if you stop learning, you'll become obsolete very fast. You will just become like, a person in the office who just keeps talking about things and knows nothing. So keep learning, have that front loaded mindset out of your, system. Secondly, the thing that I have learned over the last 1.5 years is that career growth and job progression is not linear. A lot of people think that you will face difficulties in your 20s, and then your career will take off, and then you will move up, and then you'll retire. It doesn't happen always that way. You can have a mid-career slump. You can actually be in a situation where after 8 years of your job, after having done very good in your earlier phase, you just hit the slump, and then you are like in your 30s and you're looking around. And so the point is, you have a lot of job advice to people who are like failing early. But what happens when you fail in the middle? Because half the jobs that you could have had when you have failed early will not be there, because they are below your level. So to have that courage to reinvent yourself, to probably get your brains together and to move ahead, it requires a lot of relearning, getting, and also important to letting go of your ego. Like things that you might have done in 5-7 years in the past might just not be relevant to anybody anymore. So that's one thing. The third thing is the power of habit and accumulated learning. Like the only thing that you should be proud of yourself, at least in a job perspective, from a day-to-day basis, is to have improved yourself a bit every day. So if you're reading, you should probably read a bit on the markets or whatever you're doing. Try to discuss it with friends, whatever. Then the fourth thing that I have felt is that be a part of a network of people who kind of share the same, passions and interests, professional interests. It's good to have friends who are very close to you, who are in the same business, with whom you can actually share ideas, and are in different organizations. Sometimes what happens, and I've seen that people who have been in large organizations find it difficult to move around, because the work becomes so much more segmented and departmentalized that you just know your own stuff and you don't really know what the larger picture is. So have cross-departmental friends, have friends who are in the same industry, try to understand what's going on, because the job market is very dynamic. It's it's much more different now than it has been in many, many years. Like the fun fact is that an average age of a company on S&P 500 used to be 55 years way back in 1970. Today it is 12 years. So basically, any company that is in S&P 500 would be dead or out of this picture in 12 years. And thinking about it, like if you have a career of 40 years or 45 years, you would have to reinvent yourself at least 3 times in your career. So be aware of that. Like, there are no sinecure lifetime jobs. At some point in time, we not even have like a job that you will retire out of. We are all living in a world where things are much more dynamic. Things are becoming automated, being thrown away, and you realize that the more you interact in the market and be open. So the thing is that in finance terms, like your risk tolerance has to be much more high. Letting go of a lot of these things that you have in terms of I did this in the past, so hence this should be relevant in the future. So I think the returns on experience are also not low, but they are lower than what they were before. So there is this entire importance of continuous improvement now.
No, absolutely. And let me just add in a little bit to what Shailesh has already mentioned. I think for young professionals, my simple advice would be have the right attitude, right? That's the most important thing amongst all the other things, right? Be positive, show your attitude. Skills are important, like get your core skills right. But I think what your employers are also looking for is what is your attitude, because that is what will make difference between who will get selected for a particular job versus the other, right? So I think that is very critical for people who are in their mid careers. And I think I completely agree with whatever Shailesh said. Reinvent. This is a marathon, right? We are running a marathon, and you cannot run too fast. Then eventually you'll get tired. Then you'll have to slow down. Then you have to pick it up. It's about just going on and on and on. And I think that's the most important thing. Reinvent, relearn, unlearn, and then relearn. I think those things are very relevant at these points. We are going into gig economy. There would be maybe a time where we may not have these jobs like the way we have right now, right? We may have contracts. We will come in with our skill sets. We will do what is required to be done for an organization, and then we will leave, and maybe we'll do something else for some other organization. So I think we are moving in that direction. Automation is coming over. So be flexible and be positive. That would be my last words.
Thank you so much, Ashish and Shailesh. I think these were some of the golden words of wisdom, which the candidates will definitely relate and be able to apply in their career journey. Thank you so much for joining in, Vanisha.
Thanks for having us, Namita and Vanisha.
Thank you, Namita and Vanisha.
Bye. Thank you, Ashish, Shailesh, and Namita for joining us for this conversation. And I'm sure that this entire conversation would be very helpful for the finance professionals to learn and especially to add relevant skills for their growth, for the growth in their career. And this was really an insightful session. So thanks a lot for joining and giving us all this, information on how people can adapt to their skill and how they can move ahead in their career in finance. If you are a finance professional watching this video, hope that it was useful to you. Stay tuned for more content and register for FinRise to get job opportunities from the top companies in India. Registration link is in the description box of this YouTube video. And thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.